Welcome to Crime and Controversy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of Crime and Controversy with Angela Wood and Rose Feller. I'm Matt Skye. Angela has worked as a defense attorney on countless trials, from misdemeanors to homicides, and Rose Feller is a dedicated criminal defense lawyer with over 25 years of experience. Together, they bring a wealth of knowledge and insights into the criminal justice system and legal strategies. Angela, Rose, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So today we're going to get into Massachusetts versus Karen Reed. Let's start with Rose. What are your thoughts on this case?
So this case is pretty interesting to me. It's the start off is interesting, but the ending and where we stand right now is where we should focus a lot of, or at least I like to focus a lot of my thoughts right now. But let's give you a summary just in case you haven't gotten caught up to date. In this case, we have a woman who was dating a law enforcement officer. They had been drinking all night. They'd been in establishments known to be patronized by other law enforcement. They got into a little bit of an argument. She decided to go home and drop him off to continue having a good time with other fellow officers. So when they dropped him off at the house, nobody saw him enter the home. Nobody saw him leave the home, and she left. She assumed he went inside. At the same time he arrived, somebody he was having words with, problems with, an officer who he didn't really like too much or didn't like him, known to have problems, according to Reed and Reed only, came outside. And at the time he came outside, he then got into a car, according to a witness, and left. However, the next morning rolls around, and all of a sudden, Miss Reed jumps out of bed wondering where her boyfriend is. Lo and behold, starts having a panic attack. Why she didn't just wonder why he passed out somewhere, or nobody knows. But all of a sudden she's so scared, so upset. She gets everybody together that she knows, calls 3 of her girlfriends, and they head back to where she drops them off. It's a snowstorm had just come, so there's a lot of blizzard. And as they pull up to the house, the officer's house where she had dropped off her boyfriend, somehow, amidst all the new falling snow of 4 hours, she sees her boyfriend laying there, jumps out of the car. The other 2 with him jump out of the car. They start screaming for the officers who live in the house. Reed tries to resuscitate him with mouth to mouth and trying to make him warm. By the time the ambulance came, 3 hours later, about 6:50, they brought him to the hospital. He was declared dead at about 7:05 a.m. Now the question is, who done it? What happened? The one school of thought is Miss Reed hit him with the car in a heat of passion moment. Maybe knew, maybe didn't, and then took off. The second school of thought is he went inside, wasn't so liked by some of the officers, got into a fight with them. They beat the hell out of him, threw him outside, and he died of hypothermia and the wounds he received during the beating. Who done it? We don't know yet. Now, since then, she has been found to have a hung jury. And this is what I find real interesting, because it wasn't a hung jury on all 3 counts. It was only a hung jury on 1 count. So right now, she has been acquitted of 2 of the charges, and whether or not they're going to have double jeopardy issues with those 2 charges seem to be prevalent in my mind. But the 3rd charge, because there wasn't an intent element to it, the jury came back, at least according to the article that I read, with a 6-3 favor in view of guilty, because vehicular homicide, it was with manslaughter, because there was actually no intent. Because each of those other 2 crimes, you have to determine, did she intend to do that? Some crimes have no intent to them. So for the vehicular manslaughter, no intent, 6-3. The other 2 where she had intent, they found not guilty by all parties. So that to me is the most interesting question, because the facts don't line up if you look at it from that perspective.
Angela, what's your read? Do you concur with Rose's take on it?
She said a lot, but I think she also left out some interesting facts, right? You remember that text message where, and just for those who don't know, so as Rose mentioned, it was snowing. There was a huge snowstorm that night. Police recovered text messages from individuals inside the home where the party was occurring. And they searched, I believe, I think it was at 11 or 2 a.m. I candidly forgot off the top of my head. Which is interesting because he was outside frozen. there's that. Why else would you Google that? Like, that's a weird thing to.
Well, real quick, the response was when they did the forensic evaluation of that there was already a search bar opened at 2:26 a.m. So they don't know if that specific search occurred at 2:26 or whether or not the search engine itself was just open at 2:26 and later that search put into play.
That's what the prosecution says, but according to defense, it occurred prior to that. That issue aside, there's also the injuries to the victim, right? There's the DNA, which is found on the back of her vehicle. And I think it's pretty difficult to get around the DNA on the bumper of a car.
If I may, let's just throw this in there.
Okay.
Detective Proctor was his name, I believe.
Investigator Proctor.
Investigator Proctor, I think he was a detective. He had the vehicle, he said, for a short amount of time, but when they actually went back and recreated how long he had the vehicle, he had it for an extra 49 minutes. So there was plenty of time for him to manufacture evidence, and that's what this case is a lot about, according to the defense. Do we have shady law enforcement officers? Do we have corrupt police? And would he, in fact, plant that evidence?
Right, but the black box was also pulled, right? And for those who don't know, a black box kind of gives you a look back as to what a car was doing. It records everything. And the reason for that is in case you get into an accident, it's able to determine how fast you were going, if brakes were applied, if airbags were deployed, things like that. Her vehicle showed that she went 24 miles per hour in reverse. At that same time period, she was dropping him off.
But did the box show that she stopped at a quick sudden 3 to speed when she hit somebody?
I don't recall.
No. Could the box record a sudden bump, 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 bump?
I
or
don't
a sudden
think so.
stop?
I don't think it records what tires went over. I think it would do an impact where the things are deployed.
I'm just saying that if you ran over a body, I think it would change the rate of speed that you're going back at, and it would interfere with that 24 miles in reverse going
If you're
quickly.
If you're sober, sure. But we all know she had been drinking.
She was heavily intoxicated.
Yeah.
And so was he.
Probably why his body lasted longer in the cold if he didn't die from his injuries. But his injuries are interesting because it doesn't look like he got run over. And I'm not a doctor. I have never taken any sort of class like that, but he has scratches, right? That is weird to have in a wreck.
They're not
like
scratches, they're slices. Those were huge, deep. You're correct. They are very strange.
Right.
But they were deep, huge lacerations across his arm.
Yeah.
That is not indicative of being hit. You're correct.
Right. And then we could touch on, the issue with law enforcement, right? Like the lead investigator, his behavior, 100% not acceptable. Not acceptable in Texas, in Florida, any state, but anywhere you want to go. His behavior, not acceptable. And for those who don't know, right, so certain messages came out between the lead investigator and some of his friends and family regarding the case. Things like, oh, I hope I find nudes on Reed's phone. That came out. The fact that he suspected her right away and didn't really look at anybody else. And that's something that I think we see on a lot of investigations where an officer focuses on one person and it kind of creates this very tunnel vision, and it becomes, I think, less potentially that they're not going to look at other people as much, especially not within their own community.
And you have Proctor. In Proctor's wedding, you find that Sergeant Albert, who is the lead suspect here outside of Reed, he was the ring bearer in his wedding. So when they denied any type of relationship, that was obviously false.
Right, and why not just take herself off the case? Like, this is Boston. It's not some, little podunk place in, Kansas. No offense, Kansas. But, there are plenty of other people. You have the Massachusetts Bureau of Investigations, which could have stepped in. You created such a cluster on a case where you didn't need to do that. And then to just talk about the facts of the case with your family so openly, and to talk about finding nudes of a defendant on her, come on, guys. We're better than this, right?
Well, he lied, and he should be better than this. But that's the problem. We have a lot of cases that we deal with where law enforcement officers lie, exaggerate, because they want to be able to have their arrest stick. And that's unfortunate because that interferes with the justice system. And therefore, innocent people go to jail and all of the other things that you and I have fought so hard for over the years, both on the side of prosecution and both on the side of defense. But for me, the corruption, everybody knowing each other, the town being divided, this one knew this about this one, there was a lot of intermingling. And be it a small town or a big town, it would have been more appropriate to have outreach to a third party and had them come in. In Florida, we have all the time FDLE step in. Florida Department of Law Enforcement will come through any agency that's moving and say, you know what, we want to take a look. We want to take a look for statewide prosecution purposes. We want to take a look for federal purposes, because in the state of Florida, I don't know where anywhere else, if you're having a criminal issue and the federal government's interested, they come in, they pluck it, and they take it and they move it to federal court. Easy enough to do. You can find a million reasons to put things into a federal jurisdiction or just to give an assist.
Yeah, and I believe there's a IA, which is internal investigation for police officers. I know that he was suspended without pay, which I think is pretty telling. And I wonder too, what's going to come out of that investigation?
So how many Brady violations are there? And for those that don't know, Brady violation is when the government should have given over information that they didn't give to you that could lead to exonerate your client or find exculpatory or inculpatory information for your client. And I believe that there will be that. This case, they're going to retry it, they came out and said, and I find that to be a waste of judicial economy and resources. And I think it's going to be very difficult for a town to heal that seems so divided by this issue. And I find that to be problematic, too.
What do you think about the double jeopardy issue? And for, again, those who don't know, you can't be tried for the same crime twice. So if you get charged with murder and a jury finds you not guilty, they can't charge you for the same crime all over again because they didn't get the result that they wanted.
So you said they are going to try to do a retrial?
They did say that they were going to do a retrial, but that's what's so interesting to me, just what Angela said, is that if you look at that, there was 3 counts underneath this case. 2 of those counts, the jurors came back saying unanimously they agreed not guilty.
Right.
So those 2 are double jeopardy issues. At least I would argue that with everything I had in me. The third issue, which dealt with intent, her mindset at the time for vehicular manslaughter, they actually ruled 6-3 guilty. So to me, that was very strange because the facts of this case, if you believe the officer's version, she's guilty of all 3. If you believe her version, she's innocent of all 3. For a jury to say for 2 of them to be not guilty and 1 of them to be guilty kind of toyed with me a little.
But how many times do we see jurors split babies?
This could be a baby split.
Right, and she'd have been drinking, right? So maybe the jurors said, well, I don't think she intentionally meant to do anything, right? But maybe she did it and she was so drunk she doesn't even know, because in her discussions with law enforcement, she does say she doesn't remember that night, that she blacked out.
She also says she hit him.
No, she said, did I hit him? No. Did I hit him?
I didn't see the did in front of it.
Well, from the state, certainly you wouldn't.
That's fair. It's just whether, the defense team said that they went inside. The defense team said a fight broke out. And let's talk about this. Nobody's justified how we got 2 black eyes. You don't get 2 black eyes from being hit with the car. You get 2 big black eyes because you got into a fist fight.
It depends on the pooling, too, of your blood, right? Because it can have a raccoon effect. So was it post-mortem bruising?
No, they didn't talk about it from that context with the medical examiner. They talked about it as 2 black eyes from an altercation. I'm not 100% sure, but it came from not the medical examiner, the information I read. And in there, 2 big black eyes. Well, you're going to get a black eye from fighting. You could get those big slices from the dog bite. Remember, the defense also said the German Shepherd came outside. Yeah. Now, let me tell you something. Your dog comes outside and bites somebody, or somebody's laying there, they're going to have blood on them when they come back in. But the problem is you got a house full of drunk officers. And now everybody thinks they know better. And what do? You
shut up and you don't say anything.
How do you both feel the media has influenced this case? What role has it played?
Well, I think it's shed light, right? And then we have Rose's favorite guy.
The Turtle Boy.
Turtle Boy.
So there's a guy named Turtle Boy. Turtle Boy is an independent investigator who decided to stick his nose into the Reed case. Nobody asked him to stick his nose in. Nobody invited him to. But he is somebody who went from having, I think, 4,000 followers per article to 20,000 followers per article when he started writing about Reed. And he got so involved that he actually went there to Boston, and kind of like how, they take you on a tour around all the stars in Hollywood. He took everybody on a tour in Boston of all the law enforcement officers who could be shady or have played a bad role. He actually got charged with 60 counts of interfering in an investigation.
Wow.
He spent 60 days in jail for violating a court order, and he didn't even care to boot. And he has been so heavily invested in this. I think it had a major effect too, because of his actions. She went from having 0 supporters to hundreds of people coming out for her. And I think in any case, so when I do a trial, it doesn't matter to me if it's a misdemeanor or a felony. If I have a client and his side of the courtroom, because we each have a side, if his side's empty, I fill it. You fill it because you want people to think people care. Because when a judge sees that other people care what's going on, they behave a little differently. They hold themselves a little higher, and they make their rulings a little bit more clean. And so to me, to have the public watching what these people are doing is very important, because we're the ones who lay people, are the ones that hold our justice system accountable. So I think even though he's a menace himself, Turtle Boy, maybe not a menace, maybe he shouldn't have gotten as involved as he did. I think what he did was so important because it got the community involved.
He had a ton of conversations too with the defendant. I think it was like 60 calls for unreasonable.
No, 158.
That's a lot.
And he has merchandise. He has shirts. He has banners he sells. So, he took it a little extreme.
Yeah. And violating court orders are generally not good things, right? Because sometimes you do want to control the flow of information so that you don't have a problem getting a jury panel like you may get on this one. Right? Because if everybody already has an opinion, all these jurors are going to be struck, and where are we going to be?
Well, not only that, that's a really valid point. And the other valid point is when you have the world of the internet being the judge, you do not have anybody stopping someone from lying. You don't have anybody stopping from misleading. And people think everything that there is a truth when that's not accurate. There's rules of evidence in a courtroom for a reason.
Exactly. That authentication is one of the biggest things that's the reason why you have to make sure the photographs or whatever you're trying to introduce is a fair and accurate depiction of whatever it was supposed to be at the time. There's a reason why we limit hearsay and why the exceptions are very, very specific as to who said them, how they were said, when they were said, whether the person is available or not. And you do start getting, I think, in a murky area with really, adulterating the jury pool, right? Are jurors going to lie and just want to get on a media case? Are they going to have these things in the back of their head? How many people are going to search for this case if there is another jury? Do you sequester them? How long do you sequester them for? There are a ton of questions. And the motions in limine, which a motion in limine is to restrict evidence and exclude other evidence. I wonder if that's going to change here. I wonder if the doctors are going to change their opinion. There was a ton of stuff. What was his BAC? Do you know?
No.
I
don't think they put that out there.
And I wonder if they...
please tell everybody what BAC is.
Blood alcohol content. So doctors or experts are able to take somebody's blood content from one point and be able to basically work backwards and determine how much alcohol somebody had in their body at a specific point in time.
You know what you just did? You made a very good point. How do we not know that he was so drunk? Because he was taking shots as he went to a bar first, then he went to a restaurant, but they didn't eat. They drank with friends again. And as he was leaving, he was hitting more shots. How do we not know he didn't get into a fight, get his ass whooped, fall out there stumbling drunk, pass out because of his own contribution to this, and then die of hypothermia because that was part of death.
Yeah.
So he could have contributed to his own demise, and we don't know in Boston if that has any legal effect or not.
Well, usually too, since we're talking about intoxication, there's a difference between voluntary intoxication and involuntary intoxication. Voluntary intoxication in the state of Florida is not a defense to anything, right? So you can't say, too bad, I got drunk, I committed this felony or this misdemeanor, I couldn't have done it on purpose because I was so wasted. That's not how the law works. Involuntary intoxication, on the other hand, is an absolute defense, meaning that relieves you of all liability, criminal or civil. Involuntary intoxication is if Rose and I go out, I decide to drug Rose, never done this before, never will, this is not an admission to anything, and all of a sudden she goes out and she commits a crime under the influence of whatever substance I put in her drink or her food, there would be no liability to her. That offense
There would be liability to you, though.
Yes. I mean, that's a battery, right? Because you're touching something you wouldn't have normally done. Probably.
And it could be a felony murder in this case.
No, would it be? That's not a violent felony.
It depends on whether or not the hitting of the truck came in. Hitting by the Lexus, because that would be violent.
But I'm saying like the underlying felony has to be a violent one. So rape.
No, it doesn't. You could get it for bank robbery.
That's robbery. Robbery is a violent crime.
Then it goes back to aggravated battery with the vehicle.
Right, but the underlying, the voluntary the intoxication isn't violent.
We talked a lot about media influence. How do you get an impartial jury when there is this media frenzy? Or even if there's some media coverage, what's that process like? Or what should it be like moving ahead?
I think it's going to be very difficult to get somebody who hasn't heard of the case in Boston. There are good things and bad things to that. Sometimes people are just kind of over it and they want to listen to the facts. That's great. Do I believe that of every juror who has said that? No. I think it's normal to have a bias. Whether or not that bias can be overcome is a different issue. But here, as you know, Rose mentioned the internet, right? I think because this case has reached such a high media attention, it's going to be more difficult to get people who don't at least recognize the name. I think as you move outside of Boston, or as time goes by, you will have people who are able to set their feelings aside and listen to the evidence.
You know, I think that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about in our next episode as we wrap up, because I think that the judge, you and I had talked about this, I remember at one point, that although you can't probably change the jury pool because they're so tainted with the internet, if you have any negative influence with the judge, you can always bring in a judge from somewhere else to preside over. And they would probably have to do that in here if the judges themselves were tainted, because it's such a small community that it seems that everybody there does know each other.
Yeah, and you can change jurisdictions, right? It's just something that's very difficult to do, and it's something that judges are very hesitant to do. But I think here, with the notoriety, with the police department, and with how well these officers are known, it might be a good idea for all parties involved to kind of get a different take on it. Maybe get the bias out of everybody.
Well, they're only really going to be able to go forward on that one issue, that one count.
You're still going to have an issue with jurors knowing a lot.
Let's just get your final takes on the Karen Reed case. Let's start with Angela. Let's go to Rose.
Evidence is not great here. Do you really want to spend all that time prosecuting somebody when I think the Boston Police Department is going to suffer quite a bit of credibility? No, if I were the state, I don't think I would proceed on it either, or I would certainly offer her a lesser included offense, which is just something that's shy or underneath the vehicular manslaughter charge, so like an aggravated battery, perhaps with probation. But I wouldn't want any more focus on the Boston Police Department, candidly.
So I would have done something similar to that. I would have argued and hopefully been successful on 2 of those 3 counts not coming back. I probably would have just done a trial to the judge on that other count because it's more statutorial an issue. And I would have tried to make an agreement with the state that we would agree to a certain type of sentencing that would involve non-jail time if found guilty to go forward. That's what I would have done in that one.
Everybody, thanks again for tuning in to Crime and Controversy with Angela Wood and Rose Feller. For more information or to connect with our panel, visit feller-law.com and it'saboutjustice.law. Angela, Rose, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.